Hi, I'm Devini G. I'm a business transformation specialist. I help businesses make key decisions on both strategy and the execution of that strategy in relation to the operations. I use data every day for every single decision that I make. I'm excited to be part of this conference. Thank you, Maria, for inviting me. And based on my background, I was looking at what would be a real topic that would be interest for data scientists and analysts, and an important topic. And that topic to me is making data relevant to business. Business aren't as enthused about data as data scientists are. They simply want answers. So we need to take the information from data and we need to create it in a way that it talks to business so that they understand and that they can make decisions from that information. So what I will actually be doing is that's a little bit of information about me. What I'll be actually doing is going through the decision-making process a business takes. Firstly, what a business does is there is a chain of processes in making a decision. So the first one is understanding the objective of the business. Then the second is the actual decision itself. The third is the validation of that decision, and that's where data plays a key role. And finally, we have the action made after that decision is validated. So I'll be going through each of these processes with an example to illustrate how we make data relevant to business. So the first thing is we need to understand what are the business objectives. Now, business has many objectives, and I've listed quite a few here. For example, improve performance, compare performance with competitors, for example, to see how we're performing in comparison and how we are benchmarking ourselves. We're looking at increasing sales, increasing growth. We're looking at reducing costs. We're making decisions like making investment. So there's quite a number of things that are objectives of business when they're looking at information. So what we've got here is we've got Joe, who's the CFO, and Joe is particularly interested in increasing sales revenue. So we'll go through the decision process that Joe uses. So Joe wants to increase sales. What's her decision going to be? So her decision will be, where should I invest money to improve sales? It's an example of a decision. So in order to do that, she can do two things. Jo can rely on her financial background and she can look at historical data and she can assume where sales might actually be needed to be increased through, certain parts or certain forms of investments. She might think that putting more of a sales team in there, that the sales revenue will increase. The problem for Joe is all of this information as a CFO is not is based on historical data and financial data. She hasn't got that background in sales and what the sales people do to actually make this decision. So she will always want that decision to be validated by data, and data provides her with the evidence to actually assure her of the decision that she's making. So what does she do? She goes to the data team and she goes to see her data scientist, who is Sarah. Now, Sarah is part of the data team, and what Sarah really needs to do is she's helping Jo validate the decision she has on sales. So in order for Sarah to be able to be set up as a for success as a data team member, she needs to do a couple of things. The first thing she needs to do is she needs to interpret the business question as it relates to data. So when we looked at the business question earlier, Joe had said, where should I invest money to improve sales? That's quite limited in the scope of what the data team would be looking at. So the data team have to talk to Joe and ask, what is the real data question? The real data question in this point is, what are the key influences on sales? Because if we find out what are the key influences on sales, then we can change those key influences and we can affect that sales revenue. And affecting that sales revenue will show where the money needs to be invested. Okay, so very much think about the question. What is the business question being asked? Confirm that question also with Joe. So one of the biggest mistakes is not confirming the question and not talking to the actual sponsor, right? And going in and just running away with this problem, and very much likely to head in the wrong direction. So the next thing I do is I would confirm scope, because if you're looking at more than inside the company, you're looking at the data that is from, the systems within the company, but the scope is increased to, compare us with competitors. It's a much larger project. So really hone in on what information Joe actually wants, right? And what she thinks is enough. Look at the time you're given. Often business wants something done tomorrow, all right? So really have a look at the time constraints that you're working to, and then also the cost, okay? So be very project orientated and be very pragmatic in what you're looking to define and what you're looking to present. The third point I have is form the right data team. Now, a lot of people think the data scientists can go away, do all the crunching and the wrangling, as we call it, and come up with results. The real effectiveness for business is when you have a data team that has both the quantitative matched with the qualitative. So in my experience, and having done big data projects, you would look for the data scientists, you'd look for the business analyst, and you'd look for the subject matter expert, right? Together, they can give quants and qual. Okay, so an example that I have in my experience was where we had quantitative information telling us in a workers' compensation system that customers were not being paid their workers' compensation benefits on time. Now, and that was what the data was saying, but we didn't get any complaints from customers, and we were wondering, why is that the case? So what we did was we had the subject matter experts talking to the actual insurers, and we found what the insurers were doing was they had one system to pay the benefits on time, and they had another system which reimbursed those benefits. So what you actually had was the data was coming from the reimbursement side, which was always coming up late. So if we hadn't actually spoken to the business, what our data assumptions about poor or late payments would have been completely incorrect. So always try and qualify the information you have by asking customers, checking with other sources of information, and then being able to present to business. Then the last thing I have there is know who you're presenting to. So for example, if you are presenting to a salesperson and you are looking at sales statistics, be very, very tactful in your approach to them. So having an understanding of who's going to be in the room allows you to tweak what your presentation will be. Then number 3, now we've had some preliminary works on validation. Now we look at presenting our findings, and this is such a critical issue for the data team. So when you're looking at it, nominate a person, for example, the data scientist, to present, and all I can say is summarize, summarize, and summarize again. We have reams of information of data. We have lots of models of data, but business simply wants their question answered. So they have very little time to make a decision, and they want it quick and fast. So summarize, summarize, summarize. I can't tell you how important it is. So if I'm looking at a summary, what would I be looking at? So in slide 1, the first slide I'd look at replaying the business data request. So that was the business question that you were answering and the scope that you were given. This is a protection for yourself as a data analyst, because you're actually replaying to them, this is what you told me. If there was any conflict with that, all of a sudden it stops right there. Slide 2, look at the data sources you used, the assumptions you made, and any limitations you've had. So the data sources will tell you, for example, if you've got other stakeholders in the room, they will straight away say that your data sources aren't right, your assumptions are wrong, or your limitations should be expanded. So what you want to make sure, and this is where the business analyst and the SME come into play, is you want to make sure you got the right sources, that none of your stakeholders at slide 2 have a problem. Then slide 3 is your actual modeling. So that's when you actually model the data. And what I say for business is use visuals. A picture paints 1,000 words, and it's so true. But use visuals that are easy to understand. Do not make them complex. And then take business through them. Use lag and lead indicators, but know that lag being historical and lead being predictive, lead indicators are what business can do something about. It's too late to change historical information. So focus on the lead indicators. Look at outliers. In today's world, the outliers have caused big issues and problems for a company. With data nowadays, people can't hide under norms. Those outliers make a difference, so always take them into account. Results. That's slide number 4. So with your results, look at the key variables impacting, for example, in our case, sales. So key variables are what can actually influence, or the business can actually influence. Now, in this example, we'll say that the key variable for influencing sales, and this is something that I actually found when I was doing as a CFO, was not actually the amount of salespeople we had on the ground, but it was the lead qualification. It was like, what is a hot lead, and how can we take that hot lead and convert it to a sale? Poor lead qualifications made a massive difference. It meant that the salespeople were working harder and not getting sales. Okay, so it was always to qualify the customer, to say that customer is really interested in actually getting progressing with a sale. So then we look at slide 5. We look at the options. So you've got to remember that you're not the decision maker. Jo's the decision maker. So she will want to have options. She will want to know, okay, if lead qualification is a key variable, what might be another key variable? So lead qualification might be number 1, marketing might be number 2. To change marketing might be more costly, lead qualifications much cheaper. So give and present those options to the decision maker. Then look at both the risks and impacts of those decisions. Now keep it very close and concise as I've presented here, and then ask the stakeholder questions. The stakeholders who you're presenting to will be very targeted in the questions that they have for you. So they will ask you what they're interested in, and it's a much better way to get their interest and build their interest. Now, have your enthusiasm, have your evidence, have your information, and bring them on the journey with you. Make them interested in what you're talking about. Okay. So when we look at how we put this all together, we look at the 4 things. We looked at our objective, which was increasing sales. We looked at the decision, where should I invest to improve sales? We looked at the validation, remembering what we do, or what data scientists do, is they validate the data and they provide the evidence to help with decision making. So in this case, as we said, the data team came up with lead generation, and they found that the lead generation increased sales by conversion rate by over 20%. So that's a really good indicator for Jo that her money should be invested in that area. So what Jo does is she's got the decision, she's got the validation, she knows then from that decision what decision to make and what action to take, which is so crucial. So she looks at then investing 20K to update the CRM system, but in a very particular area, in the lead generation module. So that is a decision-making process that a business will actually take. And you need to know the role of the data team in that whole process. And once you know that role and the importance of that role within that whole process, then you can actually really bring some value add to business. You understand their situation, you understand their need, and you know how they are going to potentially act on the decision and information that you provide. So I hope this little snapshot gives you a little indication of the importance of understanding that full process from the business's point of view, and then putting data in the context of what the business wants. Thank you.